You are a driver, Sam. You're just a driver. Shut up. Shut up and wait by the car. Do not speak to me. Do not look at the investors. Just stay in your lane.
Elena Cross was 20 minutes away from losing her empire. Her interpreter had just quit, and the $2 billion Zhang Suzuki deal, the only thing keeping her company alive, was dead in the water. In the front seat of her luxury Maybach, Samuel, her quiet, older driver, glanced in the rearview mirror. Seeing her panic, he calmly offered to help, mentioning he knew the specific Cantonese dialect the investor spoke. But Elena didn't see a solution. She only saw a servant. Enraged that he dared to speak, she screamed, "You are just a driver! Shut up!" and slammed the privacy partition in his face, locking him out. It was the biggest mistake of her life, because she didn't know that Samuel wasn't just a driver. He was a retired chief diplomat for the United Nations. He spoke 7 languages fluently, and in exactly 10 minutes, she was going to have to beg the man she just silenced to save her life. Welcome to Black Lives Story, where we tell the stories that deserve to be heard. You are not going to believe the look on her face when the driver takes over the boardroom. If you believe respect should be earned, not bought, help us spread this message by taking 1 second to like, subscribe, and share this video. It's the best way to support our channel. Now, let's get to that meeting.
The rain in Manhattan didn't clean the streets. It just made the gridlock shine. Inside the back seat of an obsidian black Maybach, Elena Cross was screaming, "Faster, Sam. My God, do I pay you to count the raindrops? We're moving at a crawl." Elena Cross was 34 years old, the CEO of Cross Global, and currently the most desperate woman in New York City. She was beautiful in a sharp, terrifying way, impeccably tailored, relentlessly ambitious, and completely drowning. Her company, a logistics empire she had inherited and aggressively expanded, was 24 hours away from insolvency. A bad bet on South American lithium futures had drained her liquidity. She needed a miracle. Specifically, she needed the Zhang Suzuki merger, a $2 billion capital injection from a consortium of Asian industrial titans. The signing meeting was today. If she signed, she was the queen of the world again. If she didn't, Cross Global would be liquidated by noon tomorrow, and 500 employees would be on the street. She was stressed. She was terrified. And she was taking it out on the only person she could. "Ms. Cross," Sam's voice came from the front seat, calm and deep, a stark contrast to her shrill panic. "Traffic is gridlocked due to a protest on 5th Avenue. If I may suggest, we can take the lower service tunnel on 42nd. It will add 2 miles but save us 15 minutes. Samuel Vance was a black man in his late 50s. He wore his chauffeur's uniform not as a costume, but with the dignity of a dress uniform. His posture was perfect. His hands on the leather wheel were steady. He had been driving for Elena for 6 months, ever since he answered a Craigslist ad. He was quiet, efficient, and completely invisible to her. "Did I ask for a tour guide?" Elena snapped, not even looking up from her phone, where she was furiously texting her CFO. "I hired a driver." "Drive. If I wanted your opinion on navigation, I would have hired a GPS." Sam looked at her in the rearview mirror. His eyes were kind but tired. He didn't flinch at the abuse. He had been yelled at by dictators and warlords. A stressed-out CEO was barely a blip on his radar. "Understood, Ms. Cross," he said evenly. He kept the car in the gridlock, respecting her order to ignore the faster route. Elena threw her phone onto the leather seat. "God, why is everyone incompetent? My legal team sent the wrong draft. My assistant is crying in the bathroom. And I'm stuck in a car with a man who drives like a grandmother." She leaned forward, invading the front seat space. "Do you know what happens if I'm late, Sam? People lose their jobs. Important people. Not drivers. People who matter. So keep your eyes on the road and your mouth shut." With a violent click, she hit the button for the privacy partition. The black glass slid up, sealing Sam in the front, cutting him off from her world. Silence fell in the driver's cabin. Sam didn't curse. He didn't grip the wheel tighter. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek, single earpiece. He tapped it. Continuing playback, a computerized voice whispered, "Global Economic Theory. The Impact of the Yen-Yuan Exchange Rate on Post-Market Liquidity." Chapter 4. The Guangzhou Protocols. The audio wasn't in English. It was in flawless, academic Mandarin. Sam listened, his mind engaging with complex arbitrage theories while his hands guided the Maybach through the rain. He nodded slightly at a point made about currency devaluation. Elena Cross thought he was a simple man who listened to the radio and waited for instructions. She saw the uniform, the skin color, the silence, and she filled in the blanks with her own prejudices. She had no idea that the man driving her car had once sat across the table from the very people she was trying to impress. She didn't know that the driver had a Rolodex that would make her board of directors weep. She didn't know that Sam wasn't just overqualified for the car. He was overqualified for the entire company. But she was about to find out. Because 20 minutes later, as the Maybach finally pulled up to the Cross Global headquarters, the real disaster struck. Elena's phone rang. It was her assistant. And this time, the news wasn't just bad. It was catastrophic. "Ms. Cross," the assistant shrieked, hysterical. "The interpreter. He just walked out." "What?" Elena froze, her hand on the door handle. "He said you were abusive on the phone this morning. He quit. He's gone. And the Zhang Suzuki team just arrived. They're early, and they don't speak English." Elena dropped the phone. The blood drained from her face. The Zhang Suzuki deal wasn't just a business meeting. It was a diplomatic summit. The Zhang family was old-money Chinese aristocracy. The Suzukis were Japanese industrial royalty. They were notorious for their strict adherence to cultural protocol and language. To show up without a proper interpreter wasn't just a mistake. It was an insult. It was a deal killer. She was ruined. In the front seat, Sam turned off his earpiece. He had heard the scream from the back seat, even through the glass. He checked the rearview mirror. He saw a woman who was no longer a tyrant, but a frightened child watching her world burn. He didn't have to help her. She had told him to shut up. She had treated him like dirt. He could just sit here, drive her home after she lost everything, and collect his paycheck. But Samuel Vance had spent 30 years building bridges. It was a hard habit to break. He put the car in park. He took a breath. And then he opened his door. The Maybach glided to a halt at the curb of the Cross Global Tower, a steel monolith piercing the gray Manhattan sky. Sam was out of the car in a fluid motion, snapping a large black umbrella open before Elena's Jimmy Choos could touch the wet pavement. He held the door, his face a mask of professional detachment. He was the perfect servant. Elena scrambled out, clutching her briefcase like a weapon. She didn't look at Sam. She was already scanning the entrance for her assistant, Chloe. Chloe came running out of the revolving doors, oblivious to the rain soaking her blouse. She looked like she had seen a ghost. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and rimmed with red. She wasn't holding the briefing binder. She was wringing her hands. "Where is he?" Elena barked, ignoring the rain blowing under the umbrella Sam held over her. "Where is the interpreter? The Zhang Suzuki team lands in 20 minutes. We need to be in the boardroom now." Chloe swallowed hard, her voice trembling. He's gone, Ms. Cross." Elena stopped. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Gone? What do you mean, gone? Is he in the bathroom?" "He quit," Chloe whispered, the words rushing out in a terrified torrent. "He left 5 minutes ago. He said your voicemail this morning was abusive. He said he refuses to work for a..." Chloe cut herself off, too afraid to repeat the expletive the interpreter had used. "He walked out. He took his notes. He's not coming back." Elena felt the blood drain from her face, leaving her cold and dizzy. "Get him back. Offer him double. Triple." "I tried," Chloe cried. "He blocked my number." "Then get someone else." Elena screamed, her voice cracking. echoing off the glass facade of her building. Passers-by turned to look, but she didn't care. Call an agency. Get me Google Translate. Get me a damn iPad. I don't care. We can't. Chloe was crying now, tears mixing with the rain. I called the agencies. No one can get here in 20 minutes. And we can't use an app, Ms. Cross. You know how traditional the Zhang family is. And the Suzukis, they don't just speak standard Japanese. The briefing said they value Kigo, humble language. And Mr. Zhang, he doesn't prefer Mandarin. He speaks a specific regional dialect of Guangzhou Cantonese because his grandfather founded the company there. Elena stared at her assistant. The reality of the situation crashed down on her like the leaden sky. She was about to walk into a room with two of the most powerful, traditional, and culturally exacting families in Asia, asking them for $2 billion without a voice. She would be mute. It wasn't just unprofessional, it was fatal. The deal relied on nuance, on trust, on the subtle interplay of respect. An iPad displaying broken, robotic translations would be seen as a slap in the face. I'm ruined, Elena whispered, the fight draining out of her. It's over. Sam stood silently by the car door, holding the umbrella steady over his employer. He had heard every word. He watched the panic dissolve Elena's arrogance into raw fear. He saw the 500 employees inside the building whose livelihoods were about to evaporate because of a missing translator. He cleared his throat. It was a soft, low sound, but in the silence of Elena's despair, it was loud. Ms. Cross, Sam said. Elena spun around, her eyes wild, as if surprised the furniture had spoken. What? Sam kept his posture deferential, his tone mild. If I may, Chloe is correct about the dialect. The Zhang family is from the Liwan district. It is highly specific. Standard Mandarin interpretation often misses the honorifics required for that specific lineage. He paused, meeting her eyes. I can assist. For a second, Elena just stared at him. Her brain couldn't process the data. Her driver, the man who navigated potholes and opened doors, was talking about Liwan dialects and honorifics. But the shock didn't turn into relief. It curdled into something ugly. It turned into rage. She was a CEO. She was a titan of industry. And here, in her darkest moment, the help was trying to step out of his lane. It felt like mockery. It felt like he was laughing at her desperation. You. Elena let out a sharp, hysterical laugh. You can assist? She stepped toward him, invading his personal space, her finger jabbing into his chest, right on one of the brass buttons of his uniform. You are a driver, Sam, she shouted, her voice shrill and shaking with misplaced fury. You drive the car. You wipe the windows. You listen to your rap music in the front seat while I save this company. Sam didn't flinch. He didn't correct her about the rap music. He didn't tell her about the podcast on global economics. He just stood there, holding the umbrella over her so she wouldn't get wet while she eviscerated him. This is a $1 billion negotiation. Elena screamed, spittle flying from her lips. This involves complex international trade laws. This isn't a drive-through order. I don't need you to order me a burger, Sam. I need a diplomat. She shoved his hand away, knocking the umbrella askew. The rain hit her face, but she didn't care. You're just a driver, she roared, the insult tearing from her throat. Shut up. Shut up and wait by the car. Do not speak to me. Do not look at the investors. Just stay in your lane. She turned her back on him, shaking with rage and adrenaline, grabbing Chloe's arm. Come on. We'll figure something out upstairs. Sam slowly lowered his hand. He adjusted his cap. His face remained impassive, but his eyes were hard. He had been dismissed by experts, but never with such venomous ignorance. Understood, Ms. Cross, he said quietly to her back. Elena marched toward the revolving doors, her heels clicking angrily on the wet stone. And then the universe delivered the twist. A convoy of 3 black Escalades swept around the corner, bypassing the gridlock Sam had warned her about. They screeched to a halt right behind Elena's Maybach. Flags on the hoods. Diplomatic plates. The Zhang Suzuki Consortium had arrived. Early. Elena froze. She turned back, panic seizing her throat. She wasn't ready. She had no interpreter. She was exposed. The rear door of the lead Escalade opened. A security guard stepped out, opening a large umbrella. Then Mr. Zhang emerged. He was 80 years old, a legend of Asian industry. He wore a suit that cost more than Elena's car. He looked frail but imposing, leaning heavily on an ornate, ivory-handled cane. He stepped onto the slick pavement. It happened in slow motion. The tip of his cane hit a patch of oil and rainwater. It skidded. Mr. Zhang stumbled. His cane flew from his hand, clattering onto the wet sidewalk 5 feet away. He teetered, his arms flailing, about to fall onto the dirty, wet concrete. His security detail was too far back. Elena was frozen in shock. But Sam was there. He moved with a speed that belied his age, the reflex speed of a man who had been trained to react to threats in active war zones. Sam surged forward. He didn't grab Mr. Zhang roughly. He caught him by the elbow, stabilizing him with a firm, gentle grip, preventing the fall. With his other hand, he scooped the ivory cane from a puddle before the water could seep into the handle. He righted the old man, dusted off the shoulder of his suit with a quick, practiced brush, and presented the cane with both hands, bowing slightly at the waist. Not the bow of a servant, but the precise, measured bow of an equal showing respect. Elena watched, her mouth open. She expected Sam to apologize in English. To say, "Watch your step, buddy." Instead, Sam spoke. Odaiji ni Zhang-sama. Aim no hai wa Ashimoto jie subriyasui di sakara, go yururi tu. The words flowed from him like water. It was Japanese, flawless, formal, high court kigo. It was the language of diplomacy, spoken with an accent so perfect it could have come from Tokyo. Please take care, Mr. Zhang. The footing is slippery on rainy days. Please take your time. Mr. Zhang, who had been looking annoyed at his stumble, stopped. He looked at the man in the chauffeur's uniform. He looked at the cane in his hand. Then a slow, delighted smile spread across the old billionaire's face. He replied not in English, but in rapid, complex Japanese, his eyes twinkling. Sam nodded, smiling back, and answered immediately, switching seamlessly to a warm, respectful tone that made the old man chuckle. Elena Cross stood 10 feet away, the rain soaking her hair, frozen in absolute, terrifying silence. She looked at her driver. The man she had just told to shut up because he was too stupid to understand a drive-through order. And she realized, with a sinking feeling in her gut, that she had made a very, very big mistake. The boardroom on the 40th floor was usually a place of high-altitude power, a glass box designed to intimidate. But today it felt like a freezer. The air conditioning hummed, circulating the icy silence that had settled over the mahogany table. On one side sat the Zhang Suzuki delegation, 12 men and women with stone faces, their briefcases closed, their tea untouched. They were insulted. They had traveled halfway around the world to be met by a frantic CEO without the decency to provide a voice for the negotiation. Elena Cross stood at the head of the table, her knuckles white as she gripped the back of her leather chair. She was sweating through her silk blouse. "Please," she pleaded in English, her voice shrill and desperate. "A replacement interpreter is on the way. Just 30 minutes. We can have coffee." Mr. Suzuki, the Japanese co-head, said something sharp to his aide. He didn't look at Elena. He looked at his watch. The aide stood up. "Mr. Suzuki says time is currency, and you are overdrawn. We are leaving." It was over. The scraping of chairs against the floor was the sound of a coffin closing. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. $2 billion. 500 jobs. Gone, because she couldn't speak the language. The double doors swung open. It wasn't security. It wasn't a new interpreter from an agency. It was Sam. He walked in, hat tucked under his arm, his uniform immaculate, his boots squeaking softly on the plush carpet. He didn't look like a driver. He walked with the kinetic, purposeful stride of a man taking command of a situation he had managed 1,000 times before. Elena's head snapped up. Panic turned to horror. "Sam? What are you doing?" she hissed, stepping away from the table to intercept him. "Get out. I told you to wait by the car. Don't you dare embarrass me further. Sam didn't stop. He didn't even look at her. He walked right past her outstretched arm, as if she were a ghost. He stopped at the foot of the table, facing the hostile wall of investors. He stood at parade rest, looked Mr. Zhang in the eye, and bowed. It was the same bow from the street, perfect, respectful, culturally exact. Then he opened his mouth. Zhang Xianqing, Suzuki-san, Qing Yuanliang women to Qi Dao. The Mandarin was crisp, formal, and authoritative. It wasn't the textbook Mandarin of a business student. It was the polished, diplomatic vernacular of the state court. Ms. Cross apologizes deeply for the delay, Sam continued, his voice filling the room, calm and resonant. She wished to ensure that the cultural protocols were observed perfectly, and the previous interpreter lacked the necessary nuance for a negotiation of this magnitude. She asked me to step in personally to ensure your words are honored correctly. It was a lie, a beautiful, face-saving, diplomatic lie that transformed Elena's incompetence into extreme respect. The investors paused. They looked at the man in the chauffeur's uniform. Then they looked at Elena. Elena stood frozen, her mouth slightly open. She had no idea what he had said, but she saw the effect. Mr. Zhang sat back down. Mr. Suzuki waved his aide away. Protocol? Mr. Zhang asked in Mandarin, eyeing Sam with curiosity. You are the driver. I am currently responsible for Ms. Cross's transport, yes, Sam replied smoothly, switching to the specific Guangzhou dialect he had referenced in the car, a subtle nod to Zhang's heritage that widened the old man's eyes. But today, I am at your service. Elena moved up beside him, grabbing his elbow. Sam, she whispered furiously, what are you saying? If you mess this up, I will destroy you. Sam finally looked at her. His expression was unreadable. I just saved you, Elena. Now sit down and let me work. He pulled out a chair for her. It wasn't a request. Elena sat. What followed was not a meeting. It was a performance. For the next 60 minutes, Samuel Vance conducted a symphony of linguistics. He didn't just translate, he orchestrated. When Mr. Suzuki raised a technical objection about the logistics chain, speaking in rapid-fire, technical Japanese, Sam didn't just repeat it. He refined it. Suzuki-san is concerned about the supply chain elasticity, Sam told Elena in English. But he is being polite. What he means is that your lithium projections are optimistic. You need to offer a guarantee on the delivery dates. Elena, stunned, nodded. Tell him we can guarantee Q3. Sam turned to Suzuki. But he didn't speak Japanese. He turned to the consortium's legal counsel, a stern woman from Brussels, and spoke in flawless French. La garantie sera codifiée pour le troisième trimestre, Maître du Bois. Avec de pénalités de retard, bien sûr. The guarantee will be codified for the third quarter, with late penalties, of course. The lawyer looked up, startled, then smiled. D'accord. Sam switched again. The financing arm was represented by a banker from Mumbai. Sam engaged him in Hindi, using a specific culturally rich idiom about sowing seeds in the monsoon that made the banker laugh out loud and slap the table. Elena sat there, her head swiveling back and forth like she was watching a tennis match played by aliens. This was her driver? The man she screamed at for driving too slow? The man she told to shut up? He was speaking Cantonese to Zhang, Japanese to Suzuki, French to the lawyers, Hindi to the bankers, and English to her. That was 5. Then the trap snapped. A junior executive from the German underwriting firm, sitting at the far end, leaned over and whispered to his colleague in German. Der Vertrag ist Schwach. Wir können die Klausel 14 nutzen, die Vermögenswert zu liquidieren, sobald sie unterschreitet. The contract is weak. We can use Clause 14 to liquidate the assets as soon as she signs. It was a predatory remark. A plan to strip mine Elena's company the moment the ink was dry. They assumed the driver was a parlor trick, a man who knew Asian languages. They didn't think he knew German. Sam froze. He stopped mid-sentence in Mandarin. Slowly, he turned his head toward the German executive. The room went silent. Sam's eyes, usually kind, were now cold steel. He spoke in low, guttural, perfect German. Ich werde Ihnen raten, Klausel 14 nu zu schreiben, Beaver mein Klienten auch nur daran denkt, den Stiften die Hand zu nehmen. Wir sind hier, Partner zu sein, nicht Geplundert zu werden. I would advise you to rewrite Clause 14 before my client even thinks about picking up a pen. We are here to be partners, not to be looted. The German executive turned pale. The silence that followed was absolute. Sam turned back to Elena. Ms. Cross, he said in English, his voice flat. We need to strike Clause 14. It's a liquidation trap. They were trying to cheat you out of $40 million. Elena looked at the German team. They were looking down, ashamed, caught red-handed. She looked at Sam. He had just saved her company. Not from bankruptcy, but from theft. 7, Elena whispered, her voice trembling. That's 7 languages. Actually, Sam said, glancing at a document in Portuguese on the table, the lithium reports are from Brazil. I read those earlier. The yield is higher than you think. You can ask for more equity. He looked at the stunned room. He stood tall, authoritative, the smartest man in a room full of billionaires. He wasn't wearing a bespoke suit. He was wearing a polyester uniform with a name tag. But he held the room in the palm of his hand. Now, Sam said, clapping his hands together once, breaking the trance. Shall we finalize the price? I believe Ms. Cross's position has just improved. Elena looked at him. She saw the gray hair she had ignored. The lines around his eyes she had never noticed. She realized she didn't know him. She didn't know anything about him. She had told a lion to act like a house cat. And now, she was just lucky he was on her side. The stroke of the fountain pen on the heavy bond paper sounded like a thunderclap in the quiet room. Mr. Zhang signed his name with a flourish. Beside him, Mr. Suzuki applied his personal Hanko stamp with red ink, sealing the document. The German executives, chastened and silent since Sam's intervention, signed quickly, anxious to leave the room before the driver found another hidden clause to dismantle. It was done. The Zhang-Suzuki merger was official. $2 billion in liquidity was flowing into Cross Global. The bankruptcy was averted. The 500 jobs were safe. Elena Cross let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for 3 years. Her knees felt weak. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the terror of the morning was crashing, leaving her lightheaded with relief. She adjusted her blazer, put on her best Master of the Universe smile, and stepped around the table. This was the victory lap. This was the moment the photo was taken. This was where she shook hands and took credit for steering the ship through the storm. She extended her hand toward Mr. Zhang, the patriarch of the deal. Mr. Zhang, Elena said, her voice regaining some of its corporate polish. Thank you. This partnership will redefine the logistics industry. I look forward to. Mr. Zhang didn't take her hand. He didn't even look at it. He stood up, buttoning his jacket with slow, deliberate movements. He looked past Elena, his eyes fixed on a point over her left shoulder. He walked right by her outstretched hand, as if she were a statue in the hallway. Elena froze, her hand hovering in the empty air, a flush of embarrassment creeping up her neck. Mr. Zhang walked straight to the foot of the table. He stopped in front of Sam. Sam was standing at parade rest, his chauffeur's cap tucked neatly under his arm, his expression one of polite, professional detachment. He was back in driver mode, ready to fade into the woodwork now that the job was done. But Mr. Zhang wouldn't let him. The billionaire industrialist, a man who owned shipping fleets that could block out the sun, bowed. It wasn't the perfunctory nod he had given Elena earlier. It was a deep, sustained bow of profound gratitude and recognition. Mr. Vance, Zhang said, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out and grasped Sam's hand with both of his own, shaking it firmly. It is an honor. A true honor. We have not seen you since the G7 summit in 2015. Brussels, wasn't it? The room went deadly quiet. The German executives stopped packing their briefcases. Mr. Suzuki looked up sharply, squinting at Sam, then his eyes widened in sudden recognition. Brussels, Sam replied, his voice warm, dropping the formal distance he had maintained during the negotiation. The Midnight Accords. It was a long night, Mr. Zhang. I trust your family as well. Better, thanks to the trade routes you helped open, Zhang laughed, a genuine, hearty sound. My granddaughter runs the European division now. She still quotes your speech on economic empathy. Elena turned slowly, her heels dragging on the carpet. The blood was roaring in her ears. Mr. Vance, she whispered, the name feeling foreign in her mouth. She looked at her driver. Sam. You. G7 Summit. She laughed, a brittle, confused sound. Mr. Zhang, I think there's a mistake. This is Sam. He's my driver. He's been driving me for 6 months. Mr. Zhang stopped shaking Sam's hand. He turned to look at Elena. The warmth vanished from his face, replaced by a look of utter, withering confusion. It was the look one might give a child who didn't know the sky was blue. Mistake, Zhang repeated. He looked at Sam, then back at Elena. Ms. Cross, you truly do not know who is standing in your boardroom? He drives the Maybach, Elena stammered, shrinking under the collective gaze of the room. He applied on Craigslist. Mr. Suzuki stood up. Craigslist. He shook his head, almost offended. Ms. Cross, Samuel Vance was the Chief Linguistic Officer for the United Nations Security Council for 20 years. The words hit Elena like physical blows. United Nations. Security Council. He is not a translator, Zhang continued, his voice rising with respect. He is a legend. He is the voice of the Accord. In 2011, during the Cobalt Crisis, when the American and Chinese delegations stopped speaking, Mr. Vance was the only channel open. He single-handedly prevented a trade war that would have crippled the global economy. Zhang pointed a finger at Sam. He speaks 7 languages not because he studied them in a classroom, but because he lived them in the trenches of diplomacy. He retired 3 years ago. The world became a much quieter and much more dangerous place when he left. Elena looked at Sam. She saw the gray temples she had ignored. The patience in his eyes she had mistaken for slowness. The dignity she had mistaken for servitude. She remembered this morning. The rain. You listen to rap music and drive cars. Did I ask for your opinion? You're just a driver, shut up. She had told the Chief Linguistic Officer of the United Nations to shut up because she thought he couldn't understand the importance of a business meeting. She had lectured the man who prevented trade wars about the complexity of international law. The humiliation was absolute. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was a dismantling of her entire worldview. She had judged a book by its cover, and the book turned out to be a history of the modern world. Elena choked, her voice barely a squeak. I didn't know. Clearly, Mr. Zhang said coldly. It speaks poorly of a leader, Ms. Cross, to not know the value of her own team. You were sitting on a diamond and treating it like gravel. Zhang turned back to Sam. Mr. Vance, why? Why are you driving? Sam smiled, a sad, gentle expression. Retirement was too quiet, Mr. Zhang. I wanted a simple life. I wanted to see the city from the ground level for a change. No politics. No crises. Just traffic. Well, Zhang said, picking up his cane, the cane Sam had saved from the puddle. You certainly found a crisis today. And you solved it, as always. The delegation began to file out. As they passed Sam, each member, even the shamed Germans, nodded or bowed to him. They ignored Elena completely. She was the CEO, the signatory, the owner of the building, but in that moment, she was the least significant person in the room. When the heavy double doors finally clicked shut, leaving them alone in the vast, silent boardroom, Elena couldn't bring herself to look at him. She stared at the signed contract, the $2 billion that Sam had secured for her. She felt small, smaller than she had ever felt in her life. Sam sighed. It wasn't an angry sound. It was the sound of a man who was tired of carrying the world. He picked up his cap and dusted a speck of lint from the brim. The rain has stopped, Miss Cross, Sam said quietly. The car is downstairs. Shall I bring it around? Elena looked up. She saw him waiting for instructions, playing the role she had forced him into, despite everything that had just happened. And that hurt more than any shout could have. She shook her head, tears of shame finally spilling over. "No," she whispered. "No, Sam. You don't have to get the car." The sun had broken through the storm clouds outside, bathing the 40th floor office in a warm, golden light that felt completely at odds with the cold reckoning happening inside. Elena Cross sat behind her massive glass desk. To her right lay the Zhang Suzuki contract, a stack of papers worth $2 billion. To her left lay her pride, shattered into 1,000 pieces. Sam stood on the other side of the desk. He hadn't sat down. He was still holding his cap, his posture relaxed but formal. He wasn't looking at the floor anymore. He was looking out the window at the skyline of the city he had helped shape, in his own quiet way, for decades. Elena opened her checkbook. Her hands were trembling so badly she could barely hold the pen. She wrote a number. Then she crossed it out and wrote a bigger one. She tore the check out with a jagged rip. "Sam," she started, her voice raspy. She cleared her throat, trying to summon the CEO voice, but it was gone. "Mr. Vance. I don't know what to say. Sorry isn't enough. Thank you isn't enough." She pushed the check across the glass surface. It was for $500,000. It's a bonus," she stammered. "For today. And severance. If you want to leave. I would understand if you walked out that door and never looked back. God knows I deserve it." Sam looked down at the check. $500,000. It was life-changing money for a driver. It was pocket change for the man who had negotiated the sovereign debt relief of 3 African nations. He didn't pick it up. He didn't even blink. Slowly, Sam reached into the pocket of his uniform jacket. He pulled out a heavy electronic key fob, the keys to the Maybach. Click. He placed them gently on the desk, right on top of the check. The sound of the metal hitting the glass echoed in the silent office like a gavel striking a sound block. "I don't want your money, Elena," Sam said. His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a man who had stared down generals. "And I don't want your pity." Elena looked at the keys. "Sam, please. You saved my company. You saved me. Let me pay you." "You were paying me," Sam replied. "You paid me to drive. And I did. I drove you safely. I kept the car clean. I was on time." He leaned forward, resting his hands on the back of the guest chair, the chair he had never been invited to sit in. "You didn't know who I was," Sam continued, his eyes locking onto hers. "Not because I was hiding. I used my real name on my application. My resume was in your HR files. You didn't know because you never looked." Elena flinched. "You saw the uniform," Sam said, gesturing to his brass buttons. "You saw the skin color. And you stopped seeing the man. You assumed my value ended at the steering wheel. You told me to shut up because you couldn't imagine a world where I could teach you anything." The truth hung in the air, harsh and undeniable. "That," Sam said, pointing to the signed contract, "is what happens when you listen. But imagine what you've missed over the last 6 months. Imagine the deals I could have saved you from. Imagine the mistakes I watched you make in the rearview mirror while I bit my tongue." Elena looked down at her hands. "I was arrogant. I was blind." "Yes," Sam said simply. "You were." He stood up straight, buttoning his jacket. "I am retiring from driving, Elena. My knees can't take the traffic anymore. And frankly, I'm tired of being told to shut up." He turned to leave. "Wait." Elena stood up, desperate. "Don't go. Please. I need help. You saw those investors today. They respect you. They trust you. If you leave, they might walk. I can't do this without you." Sam stopped at the door. He turned back. "You want my help?" "Yes," Elena said, tears standing in her eyes. "More than anything." "Then I don't want a check," Sam said. "I want a seat." Elena blinked. "A seat?" "I want a seat on the board," Sam stated, his voice filled with the steel of a master negotiator. "The position of Chief International Officer is currently vacant, mostly because you never created it. I want that role. I want full autonomy over foreign relations. I want to vet every contract, every handshake, every word that leaves this building." He walked back toward the desk, picking up the check and tearing it in half. I don't want a tip, Elena, he said, dropping the pieces into her trash can. I want equity. I want a salary commensurate with my experience, not my uniform. And I want your word, your solemn word, that you will never, ever treat a human being like furniture again. He paused, looking at the keys on the desk. Or, Sam said, you can find a new driver. And I will go call Mr. Zhang and tell him I've decided to accept his offer in Dubai. It was the ultimate ultimatum. It was the power move of a lifetime. Elena Cross looked at the man standing in front of her. She didn't see a chauffeur. She saw a partner. She saw a mentor. She saw the only person who had ever told her the truth. She picked up the keys. She dropped them into her drawer and slammed it shut. Then she walked around the desk. She extended her hand. "Welcome to the board, Mr. Vance," she said, her voice steady and humble. Sam smiled. It was the warm, charismatic smile that had disarmed warlords and charmed billionaires. He took her hand. "Thank you, Ms. Cross. Now, if you'll excuse me, I believe we have a German underwriting firm to audit. I don't trust their liquidity ratios." "Please," Elena said, gesturing to the large, leather chair at the head of the conference table in the corner of her office, the seat reserved for power. "Have a seat." Sam Vance unbuttoned his chauffeur's jacket, folded it neatly over the back of the chair, and sat down at the head of the table. He pulled a gold fountain pen from his pocket, opened the briefing binder, and got to work. Elena sat to his right, opened her notebook, and for the first time in the history of Cross Global, she listened.
Elena Cross thought she hired a driver. She ended up hiring a legend. She learned the hard way that true power doesn't shout. It doesn't belittle. True power speaks softly, in 7 languages, and saves the day when everyone else has given up. Samuel Vance reminded the world of a simple truth. You can put a man in a uniform, but you cannot hide his brilliance. If this story inspired you to look deeper, to respect everyone, from the CEO to the janitor, do us a favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to Black Lives Story. We tell the stories of the underestimated, the overlooked, and the undeniable. Have you ever been underestimated because of your job title? Tell us your story in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and remember, never judge a book by its cover.